Hey guys, it's Lazy. Last time we switched to the acrobatic setups to make the build tankier and smoother for mapping, pushing evasions and spec into Don't Panic Yet has worked out really well for me, and we have upgraded our gears and skill gems since then, making the build even more consistent. Today I am swapping over to Power Siphon of the Archmage, diving into some really serious crafting sessions, upgrading all the gears and scaling our damage to be even higher. Mapping is an absolute blast on the build because of the Headhunters and Awakened Fork from the Ascendancies. Stick around, I'll be showing you all the upgrades, how to craft, and how to optimize the build to get to where I am. Mapping, again, is just plain fun on this build. You are going to farm a tons of currency, so let's dive in. Alright, so switching from Power Siphon to Power Siphon of the Archmage will give us a huge damage boost and so much better scaling potential. With the regular Power Siphon, we only scale off the power charge, which are pretty cheap and easy to scale early on. But with Archmage versions, we need to stack mana, so you will end up with the double scaling, double dipping from Arcane Cloak, and the more mana we stack, the more damage we get. Basically, our damage numbers easily triple the previous setups. So of course, the gear requirements also go up. I'll say if you want to swap over, you need to invest around 40 to 50 divines to really get the most out of it with these setups. On the plus side, we'll be a lot tankier, we'll be adding a lot more dexterity, which means a lot more mana, and with Headhunter into the mix, we'll be nearly immortals for mapping. So the TLDR is we get more damage, better scalings, and improved defense by swapping over to the Power Siphon of the Archmage. Now, one of the biggest changes I made to the build was in the Ascendancies. I decided to unspec out of Pierce and go with Have You Forgotten, which is basically an Awakened Fork support for the Power Siphon. Now, the idea here is that instead of your projectile simply pierce, it will now fork, splitting into multiple projectiles. Well, the projectile will fork into 2 projectiles, and then it will fork again, giving us a bunch of return projectiles. This will let it hit more targets, which really boosts our clear speed. From my understanding, the fork projectile setup might lower your single target damage by a little bit because of how projectile will fork into a 60-degree angle, which might mean that the return projectiles have a chance to miss the target. When we are talking about pierce, the projectile will travel through and return in a straight line, which essentially will always mean a straight up 39% more damage because the return projectiles will always hit. With Awakened Fork, we cover more grounds, we have more projectiles, but the return projectile can miss on the single target damage, which means we might have a chance to lose 39% of our damage. But usually it's not going to be a problem in map because you have a lot of targets. This is not the whole picture though, because if we are really focusing on the single target damage, we'll need to be using Sniper Mark as well for boss, right? Sniper Mark will cause the projectile that hits the enemy to split, and with the way projectiles behave upon the collisions, there's the priorities in the order of split, pierce, and then fork. So this behavior can only happen once per collisions, which means that the split will take effect before pierce, which means that pierce will be useless for single target damage anyway. That is why I opted for fork to cover more AoE, since the single target damage we don't really need to take pierce. We can just put our totem closer to the targets and the return projectile will have a higher chance to hit. And this is the same for both fork and split. I haven't really done extensive testing myself. However, my friend Zork put together a really nice explanation and testing and posted on Reddit, which I will link in the descriptions. All credits go for him, which he also brought this to my attention. This will cover some of the reason why I made the swap. And if you decided to go with Awakened Fork, just keep in mind that you will need to give up either Don't Panic Yet, which give a decent boost to the physical max hit, or We Know All, which adds about 10% damage. I ended up choosing Awakened Fork and dropping We Know All because I don't think we need that extra damage for mapping, at least after we made the swap to Power Siphon of the Archmage. After testing and playing with the build, I have decided to drop Point Blank because I have found that I'd benefit more from not having it, and there are several reasons for this. The main argument revolves around the single target damage benefit that it provides. By default, when using Sniper Mark and return projectiles, you will want to place the totem right next to the targets anyway, and the initial projectile will hit for 30% more damage, but after the projectile split, it will travel another 150 units. This was actually confirmed by Mark in this Reddit post from 4 years ago. So I found it and I instantly had to unspec out. And yeah, so this means that the return projectiles will actually deal 30% less damage. Essentially, this nullifying the return projectile damage, and overall you're only dealing 39% more damage in a perfect scenarios, which is equal to the return projectile damage if it just hit for full damage. You won't always be able to position your totem right next to the targets, and overall this actually results in a DPS decrease when mapping because your projectile will fork so far away and the travel distance actually add up even after it fork, so you will actually be consistently doing 30% less damage. I definitely baited myself into chasing those PoE damage number with this choice. It's fine. I'll take the L and save myself 2 passive point, and since unspecting out of point blank, I have seen significant improvement in mapping for this exact reason. So yeah, don't do it. It's a prime example again of getting bait by the numbers. The next thing I want to talk about is the issues we need to solve when we swap over to Power Siphon of the Archmage. And the first thing to note is that we'll lose a lot of critical strike chance, and this comes from losing 3 power charges, and Power Siphon of the Archmage doesn't scale with power charges like the regular Power Siphon does. The reason why Power Siphon is so strong in the early game is that it gets 10% more critical strike chance per power charge, and with 7 power charges, that is a 70% more critical strike chance, which we'll lose when we make the swap. In PoE in general, more or less have much bigger impact than just the increase and decreasing, so keep that in mind. So to address these changes, we'll be using a diamond flask with a T1 increased critical strike chance during its effect. This will essentially cover the loss of 3 power charges, and to further boost the crits, we'll also need to make some adjustment in the passive skill trees. We'll be taking the lethality cluster, which will provide projectile critical strike chance, and we'll also swap over to the crit small notes from the watchtower cluster. And finally, we'll be taking Shaman Dominion, which is another solid cluster which adds a lot of damage. I spec into the crit multi here, but if you're lacking crits, you can feel free to take the small notes. On my glove, I also had the corrupted implicit that increased my base attack critical strike chance, which is pretty nice to have. It is not mandatory though, so keep that in mind. In these setups, we'll also craft a new one with a T1 critical strike chance, so we'll have more crits than the Piscator setups, and I highly recommend crafting one first before making the swap. The last thing that we'll do is anoint disintegrations, and this not give us a lot of critical strike chance. All in all, with these adjustments, you should be looking at a roughly 100% crit chance during mapping when your flask is active. Keep in mind that if you're also using Headhunter like me, you can also get more crit chance from the modifier that you steal from the monster as well, so there's that. So on that topic, let's talk about the gear changes that I made to the build. First off, I decided to purchase and use the Headhunter, which at the current price point is a fantastic addition if you're looking to blast through maps. As you can see, we gain a lot of borrow power just by using Headhunter, which I'm sure you are already aware by now. Initially, I planned to craft a deck stacking belt, but after testing out Headhunter, I realized that I really prefer the playstyle. Besides that, we are now using Wilmar Recruiter, which is a great upgrade. It's going to outscale mine of the council, giving us 1 more totem, and that extra totem will do a lot more than the percentage damage from the mine of the council. I also bought a bread stealer to anoint disintegrations, which gave us a good amount of critical strike chance, and more importantly, just enough intelligence to meet the wand requirements. We also crafted our shield for 1 more totem, which bringing us to a total of 7 totem, which is equal to my previous Hierophant setups, which is fantastic. I also picked up Calendar Touch, so I can use it after finishing my deck stacking ring craft to save ourselves a lot of money, because Calendar Touch is actually really cheap now. And plus, we also craft a new one and a new deck stacking amulet as well. Bear with me here, I'll try to do my best to make the crafting guide as painless and simple as possible for you, even though some aspects aren't really deterministic and your mileage may vary. Keep in mind that these crafts are intended to be mid-budget options, so they are not completely endgame or mirror tier by any means, but they will be very solid for the build at this budget, so let's dive in. Alright, so let's get the biggest craft out of the way, and that is going to be the wand. Now, for our current budget and build, we don't really need to fully craft a GG endgame wand, which I had a recipe in this video. What we are crafting today will be much less painful and a lot faster, taking me only about half an hour if you are lucky. To start, you want to fully upgrade your recombinator stations in King's March. Then you want to purchase a bunch of level 84 or higher imbued wands. You want to grab as many as you can, because eventually you will use them later for the endgame crafting, which will also require a lot of wands. Let's take a look at the final products, and I will briefly explain the recipes. For our final products, we'll aim for 2 suffix and 1 prefix. This means that you will only need 2 wands for this craft. Let's call them 1A and B, and it's pretty simple. On 1A, we'll need to combine 2 suffix. 1B, we'll need to combine 1 prefix and 1 suffix, and then when we combine 1A and B, we'll get the final products, which will have 2 suffix and 1 prefix. And after that, we'll multi-mod and add the elemental penetration and spell damage, and it's going to be pretty good for this current version of the build. If you're confused, let's break down all the steps. So step 1, we are going to use Alteration Orb to reroll the base of the wand. You want to scour all the wands, and then you're going to use Orb of Transmutation to turn them into magic wands, and then you can start rolling them with the Alteration Orbs. This is where you can use the rejects to highlight the ones that hit the mod that we want. We are looking for 3 mods: critical strike chance, attack speed, and maximum mana. The rejects will also highlight the T1 and T2 spell damage and crit multi, and you will want to save them for later when we do GG1, which will have 5 mods recombinated. Anyway, back to the 3 mods one that we want. We wanted them to be the single mod on the one. So, for example, if you get a one with the stats we want, like crit chance, together with some other random mods, you are going to need to use Orb of Annulment to remove the extra mods if they show up. If you accidentally remove the mod that we want, just reroll, keep going. Also, it's very important to note that if you do hit the T1 spell damage mod, it is extremely rare, so do not use Orb of Annulment. If you see that together with an extra stat, you need to save them so we can imprint them later. On average, it will probably take about 1000 to 1500 Alteration Orb to get all the bases that we need. Step 2, we are going to recombinate our suffix, which is going to be our 1A. We're putting the critical strike chance and the attack speed one. Just hit them with the recombinator, combine them to get a red one with 2 suffix. You're going to repeat the steps until you successfully get a one similar to this. Step 3, we are going to recombinate our suffix with the prefix, which is the mana. Any of the suffix should be fine. For the steps, go ahead, craft the exclusive mod on each of the magic ones. Just craft the exact mod that I show you and it should work out just fine. Repeat this step until you get a red one with a maximum mana and one of the suffix. Again, doesn't matter which suffix it is. Step 4, we will be crafting multi-mods and adding 2 exclusive modifier on our 1A and B, and then recombinate them for the final products. If you do fail this step anywhere, and your wand reverts to be one of your 1A and B, you have to redo the steps, and each time you do the step 4, it's going to cost you about 4 divines per attempt because you have to do multi-mod, and that alone costs 2 divine. There goes my 4 divines, and it's time to do it again. And there you have it. Now we just need to craft multi-mod on the 1, and then we'll add the elemental penetration and spell damage on the 1. There are 2 spell damage craft, and they are roughly the same. I believe the spell damage and extra chaos damage craft will have better roll of stats, so we'll go with that one. And for the final touch, we'll head to the runesmithing table in King's March and enchanted our wand with the life runes, which will give us the spell damage enchant, and that is pretty much the craft. All in all, it is a pretty simple craft, and let's move on. The next craft I will show you is going to be for a dex stacking amulet, and to get started, we'll need to purchase a synthesized base with at least 15% increased dexterity. We'll use Catalyst to upgrade the attribute to 18%, and from there we can begin. For this craft, we'll be using Essence of Sorrow to keep rolling it until we hit T1 on all attributes. On average, it will take about 92 attempts. We want to make sure that it has an open suffix as well for the crit multi, so when rolling, if your third suffix is not crit multi, try to use Orb of Annulment to get rid of it. If you fail the steps, just redo it until you get an amulet with T1 attributes, the dexterity mods from Essence, and an open suffix. If you're really tight on budgets and your third suffix is actually usable, also feel free to skip the steps. Anyway, but once you get an amulet with an open suffix, we'll be crafting suffix cannot be changed onto our amulet. Then you go ahead and reforge crits from the harvest bench and try to hit the crit multi. If you did not feel the suffix and fail the steps, just repeat until you fill it up with the crit multi mod. And if you're happy with the mod, we can move on. So now that we have all the suffix filled, we'll buy a Wild Bristle Mason to beastcraft the meta mod onto the amulet. This guarantees the suffix cannot be changed mod because we have all the suffix filled, and it is a lot cheaper than crafting it on our bench. Once that is done, we'll do a Veil Slam on the amulets. Now before unveiling, we'll craft melee damage and strike range to block the mod, and now you can unveil for either mana or life. The best option you can get is going to be mana with recoup, and I did not get that, but either life or mana was just fine. After the steps, you are going to finish it with an Exalted Slam, hoping to hit mana or life depending on what you unveil. Finally, craft the increased elemental damage with attack skills onto this, and there's going to be your dex stacking amulet. It's actually important to note that in my craft, I did not remove the maximum life when I do the Veil of Slam, which is kinda lucky. If I did remove it though, I'm not actually going to keep doing the suffix cannot be changed and reforged life because it can be really expensive. It's not that worth it for this craft. So if I did remove life, what I would do is still the same steps. I will be blocking with the melee damage craft, and then I'll still going to unveil either mana or life, and then I'll do an Exalted Slam hoping for the best, and then I will still end up crafting elemental damage with skills onto the amulets or maximum life if you get the elemental attacks with the Exalted Slam. So there is going to be the budget dex stacking amulets that you're going to get. Now before diving into the shield craft, I want to quickly remind you about our chance to avoid elemental ailments. So we are using Ancestral Visions to give us the chance to avoid ailments from the spell suppressions. Now we have more dexterity, So with these setups, you will need to hit about 1000 dexterity to really improve the spell suppression chance for the spell dodge and for ancestral visions. We have unspec'd out the thick skin cluster, which give us around 30% chance to avoid elemental ailments, so we'll need to get that on the shields. For this graph, we really want to aim for at least 30% chance to avoid elemental ailments. But if you have more dexterity like me, you might be able to get away with 28% or a bit less. But for your own peace of mind, try to aim for 30% or higher. Now, for crafting the shields, actually quite simple. I unfortunately lost the footage of me crafting this, but the idea is you're going to buy a shaper base shields and ideally evasions. I think evasion is probably the best base. But if you're really lacking on the elemental resistance, you could get a strength and int base, which will have the implicit as plus elemental resistance. I got a bit lucky and I got just lazy to craft, so I bought the shield with the all elemental resistance and chance to avoid elemental ailments. With our setups, it's totally fine to essence craft this with the Essence of Wrath, which will give us lightning resistance, so we actually get 50% fire resistance from the body armor, or up to that number, a good chunk of cold resistance from the tattoo, and now we'll balance out our resistance with the lightning resistance on the shields. Reroll the shields with essence until you hit T1, chance to avoid elemental ailments along with any usable suffixes. On average, it takes about 43 attempts, but if you have high dexterity like I do, again, you might be able to get away with less. Once you have the 3 suffix fill, again, you can use the Wild Bristle Mashon to craft the suffix cannot be changed, and then do a Reforged Influence on the shield to guarantee a +1 to maximum number of summon totem. After that, craft gain lightning damage as extra chaos damage on the shield, and then you finish it with an Exalted Slam and hoping for the best. And there is your shields. Finally, we can talk about the ring craft. I have also unfortunately lost the footage for this one too, I know, silly me. But if you've been following along, you'll probably know how this one goes as well. First, you will need to buy a synthesized base with 6% increased dexterity. We'll craft this using Essence of Sorrow and roll it until we hit T1 on all elemental resistance, which on average will take about 57 attempts. We'll want to have an open suffix and a prefix on the strings, so use Orb of Anomen to clear out the suffix or prefix if it's there. Once you have an open suffix and prefix, we'll craft suffix cannot be changed from the bench, and then Reforge Chaos to get chaos resistant on the ring. Feel free to move on if you are happy with the roll. Next, we'll craft suffix cannot be changed using the Beast Craft, and then slam it with a Veil Orb. After that, you want to craft the add fire and lightning damage, or lightning and coal, or whatever the mod that you have unlocked on the ring, and unveil it either mana or life. The best mod here is mana with mana recoup, but any options should work. Now you can finish up with an Exalted Orb Slam, aiming for either elemental attack damage or life, depending on what's left. And there you have it, a solid deck stacking ring that pairs nicely with Calendar Touch. Make sure you add an attribute Catalyst to the ring as well to give it 7% increased dexterity in total. So let's wrap this up with a quick map showcase as usual. This one is going to be pretty fast. We can run pretty much any map mods at this point in the game. And yeah, so I'm running Haste instead of Grace. Headhunter is just really strong, so Haste is just going to help me kill everything that much faster. At this point in the game, our build can pretty much farm all kind of maps, all kind of content as well, probably not Rogue. Exile, Ghosted Rogue Exile is still a really hard farm. I can probably do T17 farm, some of the farm, not everything. But I just don't like to run T17 right now. I'm really enjoying clearing stuff on T16 with Awakened Fork. As you can see, we have so much AoE clear. It is a lot of fun. Your totem just clear everything. The build feels very smooth and very fun to play. And yeah, turned out to be really strong. I enjoy going for acrobatics, and Whisper is just such a fun class to play. I've got a few more ideas to optimize the build, and maybe even considering Mage Blood versions. For those of you that have mana issues or dealing with mana issues, just make sure that you are running a good mana fast like I do. And also, you want to spec into the Mana Mastery, the one that gave 10% chance to recover 10% mana whenever you use the skills. Especially now that we have swapped over to an Archmage version, so as you can see, I have 9,000 mana and I could just keep my mana up just like that. So Arcane Cloak use now, and then I spam my totem skills, and yeah, you can see the mana just sometimes pop up 10% and then I'll get back to full right away. It is very strong. It's really helps, and it helped especially with the sustain during the boss fight. Personally, I haven't really had any issues keeping my mana up, and I start to forget how much we had to rely on the Hierophant Ascendancies, which right now I don't really miss it, to be honest. We have a lot more damage, feel a lot smoother to play with an evasion-based characters. And yeah, I hope you enjoy this versions. That's should be it for today's updates, and if you have any questions, leave them down in the comments of the videos, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Did the boss just get one-shotted? Anyway, bye.